Hello and welcome to the coffee break. My name's Miles and I am the ELT community manager here at free.com, a platform that helps teachers to connect, share ideas and find resources for your class tomorrow. You've joined the coffee break. As I said, this is our second edition. And it's something that we're trying that's a little bit more fast paced. In fact, our guest on our last episode described it as a short, sharp, caffeine-fueled online CPD session tackling burning questions in ELT. And I think that kind of best describes our session for today as well. So today I'm joined by Neil Anderson. And Neil is a teacher, Delta trainer, and author. He's based in Budapest, where he's a senior trainer at the International House. He's also a Delta trainer for the Distance Delta and an examiner for Cambridge. He's the co-author of Activities for Task-Based Learning, and he co-runs the blog Fluency First for ELT, which I steal many lesson plans from, so thank you, Neil. He takes his coffee black and long, but only before midday, after which it's Yorkshire tea, milk, no sugar. Neil, how are you today? And more importantly, what are you drinking at this time?
Hi, Miles. Thanks for the introduction. I am very well, thank you. Somewhat intimidated, though it's nice to see some friendly faces here as well, including my co-author, Neil McCutcheon, who obviously wants to learn a thing or two about the Delta. Hi, Neil, and hi, everyone else. Yes, I'm good, and I'm drinking Yorkshire tea with milk, no sugar, predictably enough.
Fantastic. Everyone knows from last week, if they joined us, I'm sitting here with a coffee, sorry. Everyone else, if you just want to hold up, what are you drinking, guys? And if you want to pop up in the chat box, is it coffee, tea, or something else that's keeping you going this afternoon? Oh, I see a few fancy mugs popping through. Plain old water, black tea, water, and someone actually apologized. Don't apologize, that's fine. That's what I should be drinking at this hour. Okay, thanks. Let's get down to it. We only have 30 minutes today, and here's how it works. In a moment, Neil will have 15 minutes to introduce his topic. As you guys know, we're talking about the Delta. There'll then be 15 minutes from the audience for Q&A. And to give you a little idea, this is how that's going to work. And we'll be using Slido during the first 15 minutes to collect questions. So I actually suggest that you open this on your mobile. Why? Because then you can be here on the Zoom session, but you can be using your mobile for questions. So again, the website to go to is on screen at the moment. It is slido.com. When you get there, you'll be asked to register with a number. And today we have what? Number 85380. You can also vote on each other's questions. So the most popular questions at the end of Neil's talk will be the ones that we get to and the ones that we tackle in the last 15 minutes today. Great. Okay, so I actually started my Delta over 5 years ago. And at the time, I probably needed someone to help me with this question. And the question for today, Neil, is how do I know I'm ready for the Delta?
Yes, that's right. And I've basically come up with 3 possible questions or responses to that question, rather. Let me just start my timer so I don't overrun my 15 minutes. Ironically, I've just been talking to my Delta trainees about timing, and this is stressing me out, this 15 minutes. Okay, so can everyone hear me okay? Wonderful, okay. Thanks so much for coming again. We are going to be talking about Delta, the Cambridge Delta. I think probably a lot of what I say would apply to other equivalent courses too, like the Dip Tea Sol. I'm just not really qualified to talk about them. So, but hopefully if that's what you're interested in, that will be of use to you too. Okay, so 3 reasons why you may be ready for the Delta. Okay, let's start with a picture of a brick wall. Does anyone sense a metaphor coming? Because there is. Okay, so here is the first reason. In your teaching, you feel like you've hit a brick wall. Now that might sound a bit strange and a bit negative, but it's a surprisingly common experience that you've been teaching for several years and things are just stagnating a little bit for you. And you might be starting to have thoughts like, I've run out of ideas. I'm doing the same warmers, the same routines. I'm doing the same warmers. I'm doing the same coolers. Everything in between them is the same. And so there's just that sense of stagnating a little bit in your teaching. And probably like me, you have to do a lot of teaching from a course book. And by the time you've covered the material in a course book, I don't know, about 19 times, it can start to feel a little boring, regardless of the quality of the material. You might even be thinking, am I actually a worse teacher? You know, conventional wisdom tells us that the more you do something, the better you get. But possibly several years into your experience, you feel like you're hitting, if not getting worse, you're at least hitting a plateau. I don't know if you've had that experience. It's kind of the equivalent of the intermediate plateau for learners. We hit it with our teaching too. How can we improve? And of course, you might also want to know what your options are beyond teaching. So if you don't want to continue doing 25, 30 hours of teaching purely, is the Delta something that can help me get beyond that? And there are instrumental benefits to the Delta, and it's probably worth summarizing these now. I think I've heard the Delta described as a passport or a stamp of authority. The CELTA is kind of something that gives you, or initial certification is something that gives you a license to teach. But the Delta really gives you, is that passport, the key that opens lots of different doors. For example, you might be interested in mentoring or becoming a senior teacher so that you can share your experience, share your ideas with teachers who have less experience. You might be interested in going into academic management, being a director of studies, whether it's timetabling that appeals to you, or course design, materials design. Of course, many people who take the course are interested in becoming a teacher trainer, such as a CELTA trainer, which is what I did maybe 1 or 2 years after I completed my Delta course. The Delta is a prerequisite to become a CELTA trainer, okay, or Delta or equivalent. Okay, and it does give you a wider range of options for teaching internationally. This might seem like a strange thing to say right now when our horizons are somewhat narrower due to travel restrictions. But one of the great pleasures of being a Delta trainer is seeing what the trainees go on to do afterwards. So I train a lot of people here in Hungary who've lived here all their life, who've taught here all their life. And just to give you some examples of what they've done after Delta, it might be becoming a teacher trainer in Spain. It might be becoming director of studies in England at a school in York. Or it might be working for the British Council in Malaysia, helping train teachers in remote areas. So without the Delta, these opportunities wouldn't have been available to them. So there are definitely lots of instrumental reasons for taking the Delta, but it's a really tough course. It's long often. I mean, you can do it intensively. Nonetheless, that's a concentrated, tough experience. It's demanding and it takes a lot out of you. So personally speaking, I don't think it's enough to just have instrumental motivation if you want to take the Delta course. I think other good reasons for being ready for it are if, for instance, you have a curiosity and a hunger and a desire intrinsically to develop as a teacher. For example, so here's reason 2. You might be ready to move beyond coursebook grammar. Now, I'm taking the term coursebook grammar from Scott Thornberry and from an ETP article that he wrote. And the article was entitled, "What Do Teachers Need to Know About Language?" The beginning of this article, he had a sort of language awareness quiz. I don't know if you've read it, but it's really worth a read if you can get hold of it. So he has a language awareness quiz. And at the end of that, this is what he says. I'll read it to you. "If you didn't score very well in this test, should you give up your teaching job? Not really, although if the test didn't at least pique your curiosity, then maybe you should consider a career in banking or catering." And I think that is really absolutely spot on. It's not so much about what you know and how brilliant you are, but if you're lacking curiosity or desire, then that's more problematic. And having this desire and hunger to learn more about language is central to taking the Delta. This is an image that he actually uses in the article. And if you look at it, you can see what a narrow slice or a narrow piece of all grammar, course book grammar is, the main tenses that we look at. And then beyond course book grammar, we have pedagogical grammar, swan, parrot, the whole menagerie. And even beyond that, descriptive grammar. So how language is actually used in the real world. And I think this is really moving beyond course book grammar. And I have an example for you that I want to share now, okay, for us to analyze, so we can get a feel for what this means, moving beyond course book grammar. Okay, that's the reference for the article, incidentally. These slides, I guess, will be shared on feed when we do a write-up, Miles. Is that correct? I assume so, yeah, okay. Okay, 2 pretty pictures. Does anyone know where this is? If you're Hungarian, you're not allowed to say. Oh, I've given it away. It is Lake Balaton, which is the absolute hub of the Hungarian summer. We're not going to talk about Balaton. I'm going to show you 2 sentences that I've often used to teach grammar point. The grammar points are underlined. When I show you the sentences, read them and decide what these 2 sentences have in common in terms of meaning and how they differ. So we used to visit Lake Balaton in summer. We'd go to the beach every day. I'm just going to give you 30 seconds. I can't see the chat, but feel free to write anything you know about the meaning of these structures in there if you want to. But I'll just look down at my stopwatch, give you a little bit of time to think about it.
The most common answer coming through for you, Neil, at the moment is past habits.
Okay.
And used to versus would for past habits, and more past habits.
Okay, good. I think, yeah, that's spot on. If I was to guess, I would guess you'd say past habits. Both sentences are about the past. They're about something that feels distant or remote. We're looking back at our childhood, for instance. They are pleasant memories. So it's something that's positive to think about. Some of you might even have said that we use used to for both stative meaning and dynamic. So state and dynamic verbs, whereas would can only be used for repeated actions, so more dynamically. So that's roughly, in a very, very quick summary, that's roughly what the meaning of these structures are. And you can find that in the course book, usually at higher levels when we contrast used to and would, but it's nonetheless, this is the course book view of it. Okay, so to go beyond the course book, to go to a sort of delta level, level of language awareness, we need to look at this at text level, okay? So in a moment, I'll share with you a short excerpt from the fuller text of the person speaking. It's just going to be written rather than spoken. Just before I do so, what's your guess? What do you think is most common or more common in the text? Do you think used to crops up more, or do you think would is more common? Any thoughts on that? Or indeed past simple, because that's going to be in there too. Okay, let's have a look and see if you're right or not. I've color coded used to, would, and the past simple. Here we go. So we used to visit Lake Balaton in summer, usually in August. We'd stay in our family's summer house. The whole family would come down at some point. We did the usual. We'd go to the beach every day. We'd have barbecues, stay up late. Sometimes we'd travel to the other side of the lake. It was a happy time. I loved it. Okay. Now, well, your guess is correct. I don't know what you anticipated here, but it's interesting when we look at it. I counted them up before as well. I've got it somewhere. Okay. So in the excerpt, used to is only used once, right? Would is by far the most common of the 3 forms. I think it's used 5 or 6 times. And then we have 3 examples of the past simple. Okay. So the question is, why is this? And if we're going beyond course book grammar, if we're looking at delta level grammar, then we delve into our research sources. In this case, Diane Larson Freeman, who comes to my rescue and tells me what's going on here. Now, what we're actually looking at is the grammar of discourse, as she terms it. So in other words, how grammar actually operates at text level to communicate a certain meaning. And if you investigate this and dig down, we can see that we used to visit, it sets up the topic. It's kind of the frame for this particular topic. And then would and past simple can be used more or less interchangeably to provide the details of the past habit. So used to tends to serve this function of being an introduction to a topic. If I went on to talk about something else, I might use used to again to switch the topic, but it's basically the frame. Now, I don't know about you. I don't know how often you've taught that to your students. And this brings us to the next question, that is it actually valuable to teach this to our students? And I think the answer to that is, well, it depends. It depends on their level, their needs and their interests. But my overall point is this level of language awareness going beyond course book level is an incredibly powerful thing to have, because it allows you as a teacher to make critical choices about what to teach, how deeply to teach a particular language point in terms of your learners. It's also a way to help you understand difficulties and problems that occur. So that's why this hunger to understand language, to be curious about languages, is so important. There's an absurdly modest Einstein quote here. I've no special talents, right, Albert? I'm only passionately curious. Okay, the man had special talents, but I love the quote. It reflects how I felt when I started Delta. I thought I was probably an okay teacher. Students usually weren't running out of the classroom. That's perhaps setting a low bar. But I did know I was curious. I did know that I wanted to learn a lot more about teaching, about language. And if you have this curiosity, it's a good reason to consider taking the course. You might be curious about all sorts of things. Grammar, for example, aspect and what the perfect aspect means. Lexis. What's a collocation? What's a polyword? Hyponym, hyponym. Yes, this is terminology, but there are interesting concepts here too. And having a curiosity about it is important. This applies to phonology as well, and all the different areas of phonology, and it applies to discourse. Is the question that everyone always wants to ask but is afraid to: what actually is the difference between coherence and cohesion? No one is allowed to ask me that in a couple of minutes' time. Okay, just have about 2 minutes, so here's reason 3. And this is a really big one. You're ready to take the Delta if you're asking, or you're ready to ask the question why, and to repeatedly ask the question why. Why do I do this? Why does this work? Why does this not work? This is the key question on Delta, because it gets to the heart of Delta as a course for the reflective teacher. And this idea of becoming a lifelong reflective teacher is so important to the Delta. So really going beneath the surface of your planning and teaching, challenging yourself. Is what I do, is it principled, or is it just ritualistic? Do I just do it because I've always done it that way? Or actually, is there a good reason why I do 5 lead-ins, for example? And on the Delta, you might ask, well, how can I investigate my practices, what I do as a teacher? And there is a strong thread of action research. So if you're interested in finding out more about yourself and why you do things and what your options are, then it's a good idea. And you get to challenge certain nuggets of received wisdom. I'll just finish by looking very quickly at 2 of them. These are things that we hold to be commonly true. Maybe we're told them on CELTA, or they just sort of, they're echoes that linger with us after initial training. The first one, you can probably guess, it's about TTT, so teacher talk time. And no doubt you've heard, right? Teacher talk time's bad, keep it down. That's a pretty decent rule of thumb, I guess, but it's not true, is it? And it can't entirely be true, the idea that the teacher should never talk. So this is the sort of critical reflection you need to do, or that you're encouraged to do when you come onto a course like the Delta, to actually think, well, is it always the case that teacher talk is a bad thing? Maybe a more useful distinction would be QTT and UTT. So what's quality and what's unnecessary? Perhaps unnecessary teacher talk is when your instructions are overlong, or you're externalizing your inner monologue for no reason. But quality teacher talk, on the other hand, you can do good things with your teacher talk. You can build context, you can develop rapport, you can provide explanations, and so on. None of this is bad. It's an area to investigate in your own practices, if relevant. One last one. Okay. So regarding listening, this idea that students should listen for gist and then they should listen for detail. Are you familiar with this lesson framework? It's kind of standard. Field calls it a comprehension-based approach. So let's do gist, let's do detail, true or false questions, etc. But is that really always the way that we should be teaching listening? Again, investigating language skills is an important part of the Delta. And I think for many people who take it, they really love finding out how to go about, teaching listening, not just testing it. So listening isn't monolithic. There's not one way to do it. I listen to a YouTube recipe in a different way from how I listen to Better Call Saul or something like that. Testing listening comprehension isn't the same as teaching. These are all big areas that are explored on the Delta. But my point here is you're getting beneath the surface and you're moving away from some of the received wisdom that we always believe to be the case. Oof, I overran, sorry. Don't tell my trainees. Okay. That's it for me talking about 3 main reasons why you might take it. Just in summary, to basically, I can't even remember what the first one was now. Yeah, your teaching stagnating. The second one, the idea that you have a curiosity and want to get beneath the surface of language. And the third, that you want to ask why and challenge your beliefs and practices. You're welcome.
Thank you so much, Neil. And of course, we'll always forgive you for running over. 15 minutes is such a tough ask, and I'm really happy our guests have been able to do it so far. Let's jump straight into the questions because there are a few coming through and a couple of popular ones as well. So on the top of our screen, as I'm looking over here, the first one we actually have with 7 upvotes is MA or Delta. What is the ELT market demand relating to those courses like, and which has more job opportunities?
Well, that's a tough one to answer because first of all, it's going to vary from place to place. But speaking for the context that I'm in here, it's bizarre and somewhat distressing at times when someone has an MA and yet they come on and take the CELTA with us because their MA, never mind Delta, their MA with applied linguistics perhaps didn't have a strong practical component. And so they've tried to get jobs in certain places and schools have said, well, you need to have a CELTA or a Delta because your MA didn't have a practical component. Now, clearly that's going to vary depending on the MA you take. So I'm really generalizing here. And I'm reluctant to come out with a firm answer. I would say that Delta improves. Yeah, Rachel, that's definitely true here in Hungary, isn't it? Sorry, Rachel's just mentioned this in the chat. And so I am being sort of Hungary-centric with regard to that. Delta is a requirement or really opens doors for getting into places such as the British Council and so on and so forth, or franchise schools. But yeah.
Yeah, likewise, Neil. I think it's a tough one to kind of answer in binary terms, but advice I've seen out there in different Delta forums, maybe that the MA may lead you to teaching English for academic purposes if you're looking for teaching in an EAP setting. Likewise, if you want to go on to a research post or a PhD, obviously the MA will be your route there. But again, it depends on the context and where in the world.
Yeah, absolutely.
Next one, with 4 votes, for Module 2, is it necessary to work with one of your own classes? How would this work? And I guess that might be, how would this work at the moment as well with conditions we're seeing around the world?
Well, okay, so first of all, to answer it in a COVID-free way, the basic setup is that so we do the course extensively, Module 2, so we do it across the year from September till June. And that means that, and the same is true on something like the Distance Delta, that means you're situated and you teach with your own classes, your own groups. That's who your teacher observes. If you're taking an intensive Module 2, you're more likely to have specially arranged teaching practice groups, like just as happens on CELTA. Okay, so so that will depend. If you're doing an extensive one, then yes, you'll teach with your own groups, and you need to have five learners as a requirement. Age doesn't matter anymore, even though A means adult. That's just branding. You can teach teenagers, younger learners. You can teach general English, business, and so on and so forth. So it's varied. It's just, it has to be a group of learners. Now, the current situation, you asked about that, Miles. Well, it's complicated, unfortunately. And that is that Cambridge haven't yet, to my knowledge, given permission for classes, for Module 2 classes, to be taught online. This is notable because they gave permission for that to be the case for the CELTA. So there are online CELTAs now, but it's not yet been permitted for Delta. And I think that's something to do with the complexity of accreditation in the UK. So it's not necessarily Cambridge's lack of willingness, it's just they have to work something out. But honestly, anything beyond that, I'm speculating. But it's gonna, it's hitting Module 2 hard right now. If you don't have classes face to face, then it's tricky to do those assessments. I'm on our course, so I'm going to watch teachers at, for example, the British Council, where we have socially distant classrooms and masks and so on. So face-to-face classes are happening here, and it means I can do the Delta and observe them.
Thanks, Neil. I like the next question. I can almost relate to it. I've heard that feedback sessions on the Delta can be quite tough, maybe bring you to tears. How can I best prepare for teaching with an audience?
Yeah, it's a great question. I mean, I honestly think that it's true that it can be tough. And I'm going to give you, I know I'm not really supposed to be putting you off the Delta, but in the interest of full disclosure and honesty, there's an image that a former trainee used in their end of Delta feedback once that has really stuck with me. They described the course as a slow ego crush. And that seems quite damning, but I think what they actually meant, I did talk to them about it, was they came onto the course thinking they were a really effective teacher, and they were in their own way. But going through the process of the Delta, it means you have to kind of pull your teaching practices apart and reassemble yourself in some way. So there's that degree of reflection can make you just doubt yourself and feel like you are becoming worse, or you're not as good as you thought you were. Now, I would hope tutor feedback. Okay, tutor feedback is linked to assessment criteria, and lessons are graded, and that means pass or fail as well as higher grades. So that's, there is that level of assessment, but one would hope that decent tutor feedback can remind you of what you're doing effectively in the classroom, as well as looking at areas that you could improve in your teaching. Best prepare. Okay, it's not so easy nowadays, but definitely the best route to preparation when you have that sort of awareness of an impending audience on the Delta course is to observe and be observed a lot. Get used to the idea of people coming in and watching you. I understand that's not necessarily easy in all contexts, but it is the best way to do it. In the months leading up to a course, get people in to watch you, get people in to give you feedback, get used to the idea of someone sitting at the back of the room.
Yeah, and to add, I mean, if you are out there teaching online or half online at the moment, it is quite easy to get a teacher, therefore, to jump into your room by joining your Zoom call or whatever service you're on. It can be quite easily done now if you can find someone to give up the time with you.
Absolutely, yeah. I mean, that's one advantage of online teaching, is that peer observation is in many ways more practical. Yeah.
Just a reminder, we have about 5 minutes left. So if you want to see your question answered, remember you can give likes to different questions that are going to push them up here into the top 3. Next question we're taking is, I'm going to take this one quickly. I missed the name of the book and the reference. Neil, do you want to yell that out?
Which book is that? The one I wrote?
Yeah, good question. I think it might have been your own book.
Okay, well, so Neil's in there somewhere. I can see him answering in the chat. Neil and I wrote a book called Activities for Task-Based Learning by Delta Publishing. It's got a beautiful green cover and it's full of good stuff, honest. Okay, that's enough of a plug for that. I mentioned Larson Freeman during the talk, right? And the Grammar of Discourse. If that was the book you were thinking of, it's a brilliant book on grammar, teaching language from grammar to grammaring. So anyway, yeah, there's lots that one could read for the Delta.
Thank you. I think we may have covered this. Is it possible to do in-distance learning the entire Delta? If,
It's
I'll let
worth
you go.
touching on
Sorry,
it
Neil.
slightly, actually, because the Delta has 3 modules, module 1, module 2, module 3. Okay, module 1 leads up to the written exam, so you can prepare for that distance via the distance Delta or another organization, another school. Module 3 is the extended assignment. It's 4,500 words on a specialism of English, like business English or one-to-one or young learners. That can be done distance as well. It's only module 2, which is the teaching portfolio, where you need to do lessons that can be observed. But that can still be done distance through something like the Distance Delta, where you have a local tutor, for example, a line manager or an experienced Delta qualified teacher who is trained to watch your lessons, and then they send it to the course tutor in the cloud, basically. So modules 1, module 3, yes. Module 2, it's a little more complicated.
Great. I'm going to jump to this one. Are all 3 Delta units necessary to do, or just 1 or 2 certain units?
I think they all offer something different. And although they're ordered 1, 2, 3 as a sort of suggested order from Cambridge as to how you should follow them, you don't have to do them in that order either. But module 1, which culminates in the exam, that can help give you a good grounding in practical, I say theory, it's not really that theoretical, but some of the skills that you need as a teacher. So you become aware of certain terms, you do some language awareness, you do some critical evaluation of course book material. That's very, very useful going into module 2, which is the teaching portfolio module. And that's really the crucial one from the perspective of development as a teacher. And the perspective of, if I was an employer, that's the one that I'd be looking for. Well, I'll be honest, I'd be looking for someone to have all 3 modules, but module 2, if it was only one of them. And module 3 is the one that focuses heavily on course design. So certainly, again, if someone was wanting to become a director of studies or something like that, I'd be looking to see that they had a background in course design via module 3. Yeah, so module 2, I think, is probably the most important one. But just, do them all.
Easier said than done, Neil.
Right.
I'll come to it.
Time-wise and cost-wise, it's an expensive endeavor in terms of time and money, that's for sure. Absolutely.
Agreed. I'm happy to share my own personal experience. I went through module 2, then doing the exam with module 1, and I actually ended up taking a 5-year hiatus before starting module 3 again, due to even squeezing a degree in the middle there. It's had its ups and downs, but in retrospect, I probably would have looked at doing the module 3 sooner than later. So that would be my advice. If you're going to do 2 of those modules, go on and do all 3 to get the full qualification.
I guess you could lose a bit of momentum, can't you, if you leave too big a gap? Although yours was with a degree sandwiched in between.
Yeah, for sure. And a final question we have time for. Well, here's one to end on. What are good prep courses for the Delta, and which would you recommend? Neil's working on 2 courses at the moment. Neil, do you want to quickly let us know where you're working?
Well, yeah, so at International House Budapest, we run an extensive module 1 and module 2 integrated. That runs from September to June. You have to be based in Budapest to take that. That's not an uncommon way to do it. I'm also running a module 3 online training course that's fully online. And I'll be running that again from January, and we'll be doing a module 1 course from January as well. Hopefully, I've got to get it up and running. That's one of my tasks for the term, to get that running. So I haven't really answered the question. I've just talked about what I'm doing, haven't I? There are lots of options out there. I think if you're curious, look at module 1 and you don't want to go somewhere to do it, or you can't go somewhere to do it. You could look at doing module 1 and module 3 first, and looking at the various distance options that are available. Clearly, as someone who works on the Distance Delta, I'm going to promote that too and say it's a really solid course with experienced tutors who give you a lot of feedback on your drafts or your practices and so on. So yeah, but there are other online options too.
Neil, thank you so much for lending us 30 minutes of your time today to come and have coffee and chat. So from here, I guess there's still a few more questions there. So what we'll do is we will type up a summary of the session today, as well as make a copy of this recording available on free.com next week. And I'll be sure to email everyone a link to that today. You'll also get an email from me following the link, following our session today, with a link to the courses that Neil suggested today. So not a problem at all. Other than that, that's it from me at the coffee break. A quick shout out that we will be back again in 2 weeks' time. And our next session will actually, the burning question we'll be looking at is, how can I plan play-based lessons? This is definitely one for teachers who are working with young learners, and Claire Van Abler will be joining us then. So once again, it's a goodbye from me. I will shoot you an email after this immediately, and there'll be a link also to our next session if it interests you. So thank you very much from me, and I'm sure Neil will give you a quick goodbye now as
thanks.
well.
Thanks, everyone. Thanks for coming. That's really, really lovely that you took this time out of your busy schedules to listen to me drone on. Thank you for having me, Miles. Cheers.